Welcome. My name is Jennifer Bolandi. I'm a professor emeritus of art at UCLA. And I'm here to introduce Huma Bhabha, who is the department's Art Council chair for the spring quarter. First, I must thank Claudia Bestor and her team at the Hammer, and also Candace Lynn for her work as chair of the Visiting Artists Committee. It is a special honor and privilege for me to introduce my dear friend Huma Bhabha, whose remarkable work I've followed with admiration for close to 30 years. Our conversations about life, art, cinema, and contemporary culture have been edifying, challenging, and sustaining. It gives me the opportunity to say a few things about her work that I've somehow never said to her directly. Huma looks hard at things. She has a deep and abiding love of horror and sci-fi films, as much as contemporary visual culture, as much as modern, ancient, and so-called primitive art. You can readily see traces of all these things in her art. Over the years, she has created an array of beings and landscapes they might exist in. The figures she creates have one foot in the past and one foot in the future. They might be messengers from the future or relics of an ancient civilization. These beings rise heroically from the ground of waste materials our culture produces and carry with them traces of their formation. She is a master of reclamation and transformation with an incredible sensitivity to the meanings and potentials of the materials she uses. The moves she makes are often astounding, unexpected, and yet somehow perfect. It is up to us to determine if we regard the figures she creates as aliens, heroes, or monsters, or sympathetic characters. They are survivors, staring ahead humbly, in supplication, or standing proudly. They face off against an unknown future along with the rest of us. Huma has been the subject of solo exhibitions all over the world, at the Baltic Center of Contemporary Art in England, the ICA in Boston, the Contemporary in Austin, Texas. Her monumental sculptures, We Come in Peace, were commissioned for the roof garden at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City and are on view currently at the Hirshhorn Museum Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C. A survey exhibition was held at MoMA PS1 in New York City, and currently at the Casa Wabi Foundation in Oaxaca is a new body of work. Notable group exhibitions include the 57th Carnegie International in Pittsburgh, the 56th Venice Biennale, the 22nd Sydney Biennale in Australia, and the Yorkshire Sculpture International in England, among many, many other exhibitions. Please join me in welcoming Huma Bhabha.
Thank you, Jennifer, for a very beautiful introduction. And thank you for having me here. I'm very honored to be presenting my work to you. I'd like to start with a poem by Shelley called Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. This first image is Untitled from 2007, a sea print. It is from a series of 4 photos I took in Karachi. I made the 2 feet on a trip home and then decided to document them as characters in a landscape. This next image makes me think of a beginning to a Sergio Leone movie, or an end to a biblical disaster, or something from a recent newscast. It's a photo that I took in Karachi. Karachi and New York are 2 places where I've spent my life, and the influence they've had on my work has slowly emerged. My connection to a special kind of rawness, a physical rawness found in Karachi, where I was born and raised, and the monumental scale of the concrete canyons of New York. Relationships started to emerge in my work between my fondness for the rough edges and the unnatural roughness and ruins being created every day by ongoing conflicts. Approaching events indirectly by way of specific moments in the history of sculpture, and responding to the physical connections of a certain kind of rural and urban landscape. The stories and themes I'm interested in: war, colonialism, displacement, memories of home, and the contemporary ruins of war, but without losing sight of the comedic and theatrical elements and the inherent humor that rescues from despair and probes events surgically within the shadow of popular culture. These make up the sculptural landscape that I work within. These next images are from undeveloped areas and active construction sites, and some of these structures are where construction workers live. It looks to me like shelter as sculpture. They actually depict more the idea of the urban ruin and are raw materials for my sculpture. When I make my work, there is no set plan, and it develops between a balance of practicality and form. I will be showing a variety of images from the ancient up to the contemporary, which either directly or indirectly inform my work, along with images of my own work. Sorry. This is an untitled drawing on a black and white photograph from 2007. A painting by Julie Moretu titled Conjured Paths, I, from 2016, a combination of landscape, graffiti, and urbanism. Sculpture, more than any other art form, is about time and history, the use of materials which can last for centuries. And now in recent history, there is an increased use of fragile temporary materials that seem to reflect the speeding up of decay, producing instant ruins. One can also recall a historical connection to romanticized ruins, like Robert Smithson in his Monuments of Passaic. Like him, I see beauty in such forsaken landscapes. Their scale and rawness seep into my work. The next 2 images are of larger sculptures I have done, are of one of the larger sculptures I have done up to now, and it fuses some of the ideas I have been talking about so far. It has also led me to understand how to install my works. The title of this sculpture is "And in the Track of 100,000 Years, out of the heart of dust, hope sprang again like greenness." This is from 2007. The title is from a part of a rubaiyat by Umar Khayyam, an Islamic poet from Iran who lived between 1048 and 1131. This sculpture can be read on multiple levels: as a landscape, characters on a stage, where ruins go to die, a sculpture garden where the history of sculpture has ping-ponged itself into dust and serenity, theaters in the round, actors so ancient that they become science fiction, staring off stage, waiting for Godot or the next tragedy, a palette born in a cubist world, witness to the birth of modern war machines. Monuments, obelisks, temples, hewed from refuse and shadows. The next few images are from the movie Stalker, a science fiction classic by Andrei Tarkovsky from 1979. This film reflects and shares my ideas of beauty in the ruined landscape. It has an element of romanticism and optimism that I'm strongly attracted to, romantic post-apocalyptic landscapes that I relate to, like Mondrian crashing into Turner, the fantasy of industrialism collapsing. I am interested in beauty even if it is completely distressed. While counterintuitive, looking for this type of beauty is not necessarily subjecting oneself to a feeling of despair. In fact, it motivates one to become emotionally invested in the work in an optimistic way. I believe this is why I make use of the materials that do not have much of an identity of their own. The image on the right, this next image is from a newspaper from Karachi. It's an Urdu newspaper. And what I find interesting is that the page on the right has articles describing the Indus Valley, the monuments and sculptures from the ancient Indus Valley civilization from 2400 BC and the Gandhara period. And the page on the left has a headline that the war from Afghanistan has now reached Pakistan, and has a photo of a child and an older man standing next to a bombed new ruin. This image is from around 16 years ago, but it's still very timely. This next image is from a Thomas Hirshhorn show in response to that war. He successfully incorporated African art, current events, modern abstraction into this striking installation. But the political reality expressed in the show made it unpopular and distressing, as if art is not the place for this kind of discussion. African art has been a huge influence on my work. The scale, power, and tactility are very inspiring to me. I look at a lot of images when I'm stuck. This one is an earlier piece. It's titled Centaur from 2000. It obviously relates to the next image, which is Joseph Beuys's Chair with Fat. I'm a big fan of his work, his connection to history, fiction, and nonfiction. I like the ritualistic quality and how his work has a fragile, transformative mythology. I also like how the work has been photographed. And then that makes one think of Brancusi's photographs of sculptures in his studio. So this image is from Joseph Beuys's studio, and this is Brancusi. This image is an intense view of a Michael Heiser piece called Double Negative. Like Beuys, it has a timelessness, but is permanent and solid. It's an area which reveals the landscape, without any construction. And this is a drawing on a photo that I took from 2007. This is a broken atlas from the Temple of Jupiter in Agrigento, Sicily. An ancient eroded stupa from 4000 BC from southern Pakistan. My drawing, Untitled, from 2007, ink on black and white photograph, makes me think of a certain drone-like viewpoint. A lot of these early photo drawings used photos that I took in Karachi. Gradually, over time, I began to use photos taken in other places. This image is from the vast complex of abandoned temples at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, built between 879 and 1218. I like the way the stone is stacked and carved. I myself use stacking as armature in my sculptures. a beautiful relief from Babylon, the demon from Jeepers Creepers, the movie, ancient Roman stone head, a beautiful mask by Matthew Monahan. Here is an example of the contemporary use of fragile materials like paper, referring to an image or mask which seems ancient and timeless. This is titled They Don't Speak from 2007. I started making busts around 2004. I was very aware of Picasso and wanted to make large heads. This is also when some of the materials I use for my armatures, like styrofoam and clay, were introduced into my work. I began to like how the materials complemented each other. It was a combination I had not seen before, and realizing how modeling clay in an expressionistic way was something that I really enjoyed. The work really started to develop in a rich direction. This piece is titled JC from 2006. Untitled from 2008. This image relates to an earlier image I showed of tanks in the green wastelands of Stalker, but the tank stands in the entrance to the Baghdad Museum. I'm also interested in how here the ancient is contrasted with the frighteningly new, an endless formula of symmetry. This is a sculpture by Sterling Ruby. I like how it relates to the next image of a Boli sculpture, and yet the materials are synthetic in this case versus the natural in this case, but with a very similar spirit, fetishistic, ritualistic in their use. Another image from a Karachi newspaper of an I-beam being transported by a donkey cart. It's a common sight, and donkeys are used for transportation of a lot of heavy materials and are amazingly resilient. They are also one of my favorite animals. This is a sculpture of mine called The Main Player from 2007. It is an important piece, larger than some of the earlier ones like this that I just showed you. I refer to these as large heads. But in this one, I developed the landscape idea more, and also the shift in scale that takes place from landscape to architecture, armature to bust. Balzac by Rodin. I happened to be looking at Rodin a lot when I first started working with clay in Mexico. I was with my husband, Jason Fox, and a friend in Guadalajara. Lots of wet clay in black garbage bags, and a Rodin book. I experimented and I realized I could model clay. This is Untitled from 2004, one of my first clay sculptures. It's romantic, referring to Balzac and Beauty and the Beast by Jean Cocteau. This is an image of the Laocoon group as monkeys, a woodcut from 1545 by Niccolo Boldini. Replacing primates with humans attracted me. Another drawing on a photograph from 2015, ink and acrylic and collage on a color photo that I took. It's like approximately 50 by 80 inches, larger than what I've shown to you up till now. And this was my Laocoon. Image of an ancient Ganesh. This piece is titled Sleeper from 2005. It was my first life-size standing figure. I was thinking of the chorus, and it's interesting how the pedestal became part of the armature and the sculpture. It's also a found object. Is the figure stuck in the white cube pedestal, or is it part of it? I like this ambiguity. My pieces are made with the idea of each view referring to something else. You have to walk around them to experience them completely. This is an early chorus. An ancient Egyptian couple. I'm really drawn to the idea of walking monuments, as embodied by early Greek chorus and ancient Egyptian figures. Inspired by these sculptures, I became especially fascinated with the idea of making feet without bodies, as in the first image I showed you. This is the Aztec stone sculpture of Coatlicue in Mexico City. Sorry, this is the one. This piece is called Degraded, 2006. Further explores my interest in the figure with movement. It is a Roman torso with 2x4 chorus legs, also based on The Walking Man by Rodin. This piece seems sadly contemporary. I showed a photo of Brancusi's studio earlier. I see here a real cinematic element, which is what I try to develop in photos of my sculpture. This was a photo taken of a sculpture I made in Mexico titled, on my trip to Mexico, titled Nelly, 2003, which also shows further experiments in clay modeling and my experiments with a cinema-like setting. For me, it is like Vermeer meets Bernini's Saint Teresa in Ecstasy. Giacometti. His sculptures sometimes give the feeling that time flattens things. They look so weathered they could be ancient. His vision is already imbued with a cinematic aesthetic, the out-of-focus imagery, which even functions as depth. He is creating perspective with something directly in front of him. Rauschenberg's monogram from 1955. This piece is called Bumps in the Road, 2008. The title refers to a US soldier's term for driving over dead bodies in Iraq. I liked how I developed the idea of the stage, plinth, and road, looking back at the larger piece I showed earlier called and in the track of 100,000 years, which was from 2007. This sculpture has much more implied movement, something I get very much from looking at Rodin. It makes me think of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza traveling down Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Burghers of Calais. You can almost imagine a camera tracking around the figures. It's very theatrical in a modern way. This one is titled Magic Carpet. It's from 2003. The base is clear plastic, cheap special effects, and it's about love. Donatello's David. David Almage. I love the grafting here of the classical with the sci-fi. An Imperial Stormtrooper reclining, Untitled from 2005. This piece is also Untitled from 2005. It's the second version of this idea, first made in 2002 and originally came out of working with real clay in Mexico and noticing how the plastic garbage bags covering the clay to keep it from drying also resembled a figure. A body bag, a prostrate praying figure. And I see this as a memorial. This sculpture can be assembled and reassembled. This is a photographic piece taken at the beach in Karachi of the same sculpture. It becomes more cinematic and the narrative changes. Another sculpture from 2005 that I photographed in Karachi as a photographic piece, with the same idea of documenting them, but also using photography as a medium to explore the implied cinematic narrative. Cindy Sherman film still number 21 from 1979. This piece is called Bagram from 2010, ink on black and white photograph, and it's approximately 50 by 80 inches. This is called Museum Without Walls from 2005. I started by making a large head inspired by Picasso's Head of a Woman, which is at the Museum of Modern Art, which led to realizing the possibilities of landscape, modernism, and scale that came up. The exposed armature could be read as a modernist architectural structure or a postmodernist one. Picasso, same crouching figure, giant head. It is also about recycling. This piece is titled Man of No Importance, 2006. These images highlight the scale changes that I talked about. I see these scale changes as metaphors for time changes, prehistory, post-history, contemporary. This image is inside the sculpture, so it's in the back of the head. I see these shifting ideas of time in the writings of Philip K. Dick, which has been a huge influence on my work. For me, science fiction literature and films provide imagery that helps me mutate and modernize a lot of my early modernist influences. I don't think Giacometti and Picasso were reading science fiction or watching sci-fi movies like Alien and Terminator. Sometimes I need to go beyond current reality to be creative, and all this provides great source material. This piece is Untitled, 2006. It's a white styrofoam totem with clay hands and head. This one is titled Athos. It's a second full life-size standing figure from 2006. This is when I first started carving and scratching as a form of drawing on the sculpture. This one is titled Born Darkly, 2008, carving and painting the foam with clay. This is a close-up view of the painted foam. This is a Untitled from 2009, an early cork sculpture. I found some cork in a greeting card store that had closed in my neighborhood, but was selling off their inventory. So it led to me discovering different materials, and I'm always looking for new materials, and it has led to a whole series of cork sculptures. This piece is titled 1000 from 2009. It is a depiction of medieval effigies. This I saw as a sarcophagus or a tomb or a crate that has become a plinth. It has urban graffiti friezes, where the sculptures on top are representations of what was buried inside. They can also be seen as a reclining figure or a pair of architectural models for imagined tombs. The graffiti is inspired by what you see, by the graffiti you see in this country, and also the graffiti that I have seen in Pakistan. Perhaps the messages are political, religious, or abstract. This is an ink on black and white photo, originally made for reconstructions, which was the title of a portfolio of 16 photogravure prints that I made, and also 2 woodcuts in 2007. I started taking photographs in Karachi around 2006-7 in an area close to the city beach, and some of the photos and drawings I have shown document the yearly changes. It's an area which reveals the landscape without any construction. I was fascinated by the idea of using unfinished construction sites or foundations as imaginary plinths for monumental sculptures, which is what I drew on them. This is Francis Bacon, Screaming Pope from 1953. This piece is titled The Orientalist. It's from 2007. It's my second bronze sculpture. It is life-sized. It is a life-size seated figure with a silver nitrate patina. The title is from the book by Edward Said, which I was reading again at that time, concerning historical Western perceptions of the East. Said analyzes the history and falseness of Orientalism in an attempt to show how limiting racist historical ideologies can be. It has the face of Dorian Gray as a metaphor for corrupt ideas, such as Orientalism, which thrived during the Victorian period. It also sort of functions as an Egyptian sphinx, a seated god, or a cyborg king. I tried to take advantage of how a multitude of materials can be unified by the bronze casting process. This sculpture is called Imagine Now for Ages from 2019. Another seated figure made with a multitude of materials found and new, skeletal chairs from my childhood, clay, discarded dog toys, styrofoam, and bark, among other materials. These are more drawings from 2007, ink on black and white photos that I took in Karachi. Here are drawings from 2007, and the next couple are between 2007 and 2008, where I am starting to add color. An amazing African sculpture. The symmetry was a big influence on the pastel drawings I began to do, and so was the face of one of my favorite character actors, Lance Henriksen. I have a lot of respect for character actors. They work hard and are very talented and are true artisans of their craft. I like seeing myself as an artisan who uses my hands. Ink and pastel on paper from 2007. Oh, sorry. This is Untitled from 1994, an older mixed media mask sculpture. My interest in portraiture is consistent, even if the process changes. Ink on black and white photograph from 2009. The idea inspired by Picasso's lithographs and by film noir lighting. Ink and pastel drawing with collage from 2011. This is an image from Kippenberger's series of amazing lithographs inspired by Jericho's Raft of the Medusa. They were made before he died. And this is an image from La Ventura, the Antonioni film from 1960, when the couple are going to the island where the woman disappears. It was thinking about these kinds of relationships that set the mood that I was in when I made the next piece, which is titled My Skull is Too Small from 2009. It is death as traveling at sea, going over to the other side but not moving, calling for help or waving goodbye. It is also a kind of memorial. This piece, though, was very different in how it reads and further explores some of the ideas I was working with in the piece 1000. The graffiti in My Skull is Too Small is more personal. Names and private messages, friezes and decorations on a boat. This piece is untitled, from 2010, large ink on photo drawing with collage. I started using images of dogs and wildlife from calendars as collage elements because they looked so good. It also reflects my anxiety of the ongoing destruction of the global ecosystems. This piece is titled Tupac Amaru, another life-size standing figure, from 10. This piece is called Student, from 2009. It's a cork sculpture with styrofoam. I ran out of cork, so I decided to add styrofoam. And I think the combination was successful. This piece is called Ghost, and it's from 2008. It's just styrofoam and found materials. Lecturer, from 2010, my first cork bronze. God of Some Things, from 2012. It has a patina. This one is approximately 8 feet high, but it also has the opposite effect. The cork translated into bronze looks molten and heavy. I like the idea of a non-religious artist like myself creating my own religious icons versus the history of art where artists create work for the state-sanctioned religion of the time. This piece is titled Thought and Scribe, and it's from 2012. It's approximately 9 feet by 8 feet by 10 feet high, and it is made up of 3 different plexiglass pedestals that are stacked on top of each other. It is based on an Egyptian sculpture. The plexi creates a sci-fi element. It also seems also to be levitating. Egyptians as aliens is a common sci-fi theme. An homage to John Chamberlain. My scribe is a crushed, reclining figure. And that's my thought from 3 different views. This image is from my show, which was titled Unnatural Histories. And it has 2 of the sculptures, God of Some Things from 2012, and the styrofoam stacked sculpture next to it called Ghost of Human Kindness from 2011. This is a painted bronze, the Ghost of Human Kindness, and it's the second one where I have used styrofoam and clay. I'm playing with the illusion that can be created by bronze. It looks light, but it actually weighs almost a ton. It's not a new idea, but I tried to add an element of casual but expressive construction to it. This piece is titled Unnatural Histories. It's from 2012. I was inspired by how the landscape can be seen like skin or flayed skin. And it has a very strong front and back, 5 components that fit together, and an 11-foot found tire tread and a found cardboard cutout. And some details. This piece is titled There Is No Killing What Can't Be Killed. It's from 2012. It's cork and styrofoam, my first large one, approximately 7 feet tall. Some larger drawings on photographs from 2013, and the next ones with collage and ink. This is from 2015. I started using images. At this point, I had started taking photos in different places, and I was also using the centerfold images from a High Times magazine given to me by a friend. I started to realize how the centerfolds were photographed in a way where they look like giant traveling spores that I could use in my work. This piece is titled Vessel from 2014. Ink, pastel, and collage with wolves from 2014. And it's untitled. And this one is the green one, where it is also untitled. This is a large drawing, another drawing with weed images from the High Times magazine and the photograph that I took. I think it's from Berlin. This piece is titled Constantium. It's from 2014. It's a patinated bronze with a chain. The chain came with the found object, which became bronze, which is what the figure is standing on. This piece is titled Friend. It is also a bronze sculpture. It's a painted bronze. It was initially made completely of, it's two large pieces of styrofoam stacked, and then I painted on them and carved into them, and then had made into bronze. And it's Friend from 2015. I started to make new large drawings at the same time on white photo backdrop paper. And these are made with cork dust in my studio. So they're almost function as studio traffic, like radiograms tracking the forest of my sculptures, covered with the dust of footprints and paint residue. A rubbing that appears like a map where sculptures were housed, ghosts of the studio process, and it allows me to think about Man Ray, another artist that has been a huge influence from when I was younger. This is another large cork sculpture. It's called Against What, Against Whom, from 2014. This is approximately 7 feet. And it has cork and pink styrofoam. This piece is titled Special Guest Star from 2016, a new theatrical twist, breaking away from the usual either vertical or horizontal orientation of figurative sculpture. Here I'm tilting the plinth or the figure at a 45-degree angle by placing a simple welded metal stand underneath. The resulting angle creates a dynamism and a drama that activates the reclining figure, a figure that puts Jasper Johns in an erotic encounter with my own version of a post-Louise Bourgeois figurative sculpture in a new and exciting way. This sculpture highlights my long-term interest in revisiting the history of figurative sculpture through the time machine of contemporary cinematics, science fiction, and horror. It also is very democratic, as there are lots of ideas, but no one idea is dominating. This piece is titled Cowboys and Angels. It's from 2018. It's another cork and styrofoam standing figure, but by this time I had started to use a lot of paint and was using a lot of oil stick and acrylic paint on it. This piece is titled Receiver. It has been referred to as a giant. From 2019, left foot forward, archaic smile, almost clown-like. It's a bronze, painted and patinaed bronze. And here it is installed in Wakefield, England, facing off with a Queen Victoria in front of it. This piece is titled We Come in Peace from 2018. Here you see it, the installation was titled We Come in Peace, and this sculpture is titled We Come in Peace. There are two companions that have landed on the roof of the Met. I've always loved sci-fi, and especially the concept repeated often in movies and novels of the extreme future mashed up with the extreme past. The pyramids being created by extraterrestrials or mutants, for example. In the Met rooftop installation, both figures reflect this concept in how they appear and relate to each other. Ultimately, they are both monuments. The standing figure has come to defend, summoned by the other, can be seen as a victor and defender. The garbage bag sculpture in front of it has summoned it maybe, and praying. It's a praying corpse figure, is a symbol of the conquered or the victims. It is like the Sphinx, except the head is bowed down in submission and the arms stretched out, and it has a tail of rubble, but the figure also has the potential for rising up. The Sphinx is the 5,000-year guardian of history, returning as a healer. As far as humor in my work is concerned, the figures could also be characters in some offbeat, absurd science fiction or Hammer horror film. For me, this potential reading is important because it keeps the work from becoming too self-righteous and one-dimensional. Here we see, this piece is on its own, it's also titled Benam, which means without name. And it's the fourth version of this idea, except now it has become truly monumental and it's in bronze. And this is from 2018. Well, they both are. With We Come in Peace, which by itself, I was thinking of Balzac by Rodin, Predator, Coatlicue, among some of the giants that I have seen. This is an image from my show. It's called They Live at the ICA in 2019. It's an install image, a meeting place, a gathering. It is a 3D spectacle, a stage for the sculptures as actors. I see installing the work in a show as an opportunity to stage a recreation of imaginary events. This piece is titled Delamite Highlander. It was when I started to work with cork on a much smaller scale. And it's from 2019. This piece is titled Ground. It's a relief sculpture. I started to think about how I could treat the materials that I use and work straight on the wall again. There's a mixture of materials, cork and tire treads and some rubber from molds. I really throw things away, so sooner or later they come in handy. This piece is titled The Past is a Foreign Country. It's from 2019. It came right after Ground, or at the same time, but it took me a longer time to finish. Again, it has the tire tread as the crown, and it has two big styrofoam feet sticking out. And it also has a skull as a remnant of the face. This piece is also a relief sculpture. It's called I Know. It's from 2021. It is half architectural, half sculptural, half votive. And it's a relief, and it's 7 feet tall. It has a veil of blue rubber, or it could be a mask. Another image of an install show at the Baltic titled Against Time from 2020. Sorry. This one. Where again there's a gathering of the figures. This one is called Ripley. It's from 2011, and it's named after the female protagonist in the Alien film series. It's two styrofoam, I'm sorry, it keeps moving, two styrofoam pieces attached and then painted and scratched. This is an image from my show titled Facing Giants from 2021, and I decided to change my scale, and these are a few of the painted and patinaed smaller bronzes. One of those bronzes is called Number One from 2021. This one is titled The Ancient and Arcane, also from 2021. It's a side view. This one is a patina bronze. This is a painted bronze called Shadow Gang from 2021. Here you can see I have also added some found materials to the bronze and the clay. An installation view of one of the rooms from my install of my show called Facing Giants in 2021, which looks almost like a room of archaeological finds. I was thinking about counter monuments, the idea of capturing the spiritual quality inherent in any structure, large or small, which conveys the feeling of its eternity. In these next few works, you'll see that a little bit more. This piece is titled Prime Traveler from 2021. It's a painted bronze, and it's approximately 7 feet high. This is a detail. Then I decided to go back to my interest in painting sculpture, painting in terms of like the surface not being just the material, but I wanted to experiment a little bit with a little bit of an expressionistic painting touch. So this one is called Soft Touch. This is the back with a giant gaping eye. This one is titled Listen to What I'm Not Saying from 2021. Sorry, it's moving a little faster than I expected. Again, it has another gaping eye in the back of its head. Sorry. I don't know why it's moving so fast. This piece is called Pathfinder, and it's approximately a foot in height. So it's much tinier, and it's also from 2021. And here I was thinking about the idea of a powerful personal deity showing the biological passage of time. I combined the half of a horseshoe crab with a small, as the head of a cork figure. This one is called Amy. It's from 2021 also. It's anxious, votive, mysterious, and sublime. And this is also on the smaller scale. The next three images are drawings on paper, also from 2021, using collage from calendars. This is a larger format drawing, something that I've just started in the last 6 months. And it's also on paper. This one is from 2021, Untitled. It has collage and ink, pastel. This is a drawing on a large black and white photo with ink and collage. This is approximately 50 by 80 inches. The one I showed you before is 50 by 50 inches. And this is my most recent install image that I wanted to include, mainly because the space where I showed it was such a beautiful space. It was a Tadao Ando designed all concrete gallery. And it was an opportunity to really think about an interesting install, which, as I mentioned before, it's important to me how to install my work. And I experimented with, I was at a residency and I made sculptures out of brick firing clay. And the install was based on, it's a fragmented install, and it was based on a sculpture by Joseph Beuys titled Virgin from 1961. And the clays, and that is only visible in the way the layout of the concrete pedestals, which are rising up from the concrete floor. The clay sculptures are laid on cast concrete plinths and are supposed to give the impression of rising high and low, like an undulating landscape. It could be one body or many body parts to make up a body. And it also resembles a tomb. And this is the final image of a sculpture that I made to fit into the landscape. It's called Sentinel from 2021. It's a watchful, benign spirit merging with the landscape. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Hi. Um, I was wondering if this is a weird echo. um, if you like to get feedback when you're working on stuff in the studio, or if you prefer to not have any voices.
Depends if it's worthwhile. I mean, of course.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. What does like a typical studio day kind of look like for you? I'd be really curious to know.
Um, I try to work during the day. I mean, it depends on what my deadlines are and how hard I have to work, how much. So I'll work during the day, sometimes in the evening. I work where I live, so it's more convenient. And when I'm, yeah, and I take breaks, and I don't do anything. But I'm become a lot more, hardworking and have a proper schedule. So I work every day.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for the very inspiring talk. And I just wanted to ask how the different mediums you work in interrelate, or how the works on paper and sculptures depend on one another. If sometimes the works on paper serve as preparatory for the sculptures, or to develop some ideas, or if they are completely independent.
I don't make any preparatory sketches for my sculptures. Um, the drawings do relate, and I started to notice that the drawings became more sculptural, and I started to draw on my sculptures when I started to work on them in the same space. And they are independent of each other, but at the same time, they do feed off of each other. But I don't make any preparatory sketches for the sculpture.
Hi, I was wondering how much language matters in your work in terms of titling, because I realize most of the works are titled in English, and English is such a contemporary language, and only one sculpture was titled Binam, which is, I think, is in Urdu. And Urdu is like such a such an ancient language and has so much history compared with English. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I end up speaking English most of the time, and I rarely speak Urdu because I have no one to speak it with. Um, but with a piece like Benam, it is a memorial for me, and it is about unnamed victims, and that's why I felt that the only word that actually existed would be that, in my mind. So that's why sometimes I have in the past titled things in Urdu, but it depends if it works. And I think in this piece it worked, and so that's why I titled it. But otherwise, I mean, I'm not the kind of artist that uses language necessarily in my work. I'm much more of an image-based artist, and I like there to be some humor in the titles, and also a way of giving some kind of hint as to what I think the piece might be, or in a sense, like within the work, the viewer is challenged to make up their own narratives by experience, what they make out of a title. So I like it to be more open-ended, not restricting different meanings that somebody else would take from the work. So, that's what I do.
I had a question regarding, you opened with a poem by Shelley that I love, Ozymandias, and I was curious, there were a lot of themes and artists that you referenced throughout the presentation, but are there any poets or collections of poems that you are looking at or, that you keep close with you that are sort of key points or, connected to the work?
I'd like there to be. I think I have to become more well-read, Yeah, I mean, there are some, but I think I don't have. I don't have so. I'm not so well read in poetry. It just sometimes things come up and I respond to that, or I feel it responds to what I'm doing, and there are certain writers I like, and so I would say that no, I'm not. There are not so many other poets that I have access to, or I don't think I have reached a point where there are specific poets that I think I can use their work in as far as titling or discussing mine. But I would like to know more,
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation and for all the inspiration and sharing your inspiration. I saw your sculpture in Washington, D.C. In the mall, and I was just passing, and I turned and I was like, what is this? It's so big, and like your more recent structures, they're very striking in how they juxtapose these old buildings of Smithsonian institutions, and you showed another sculpture of your sculpture facing Queen Victoria, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that makes you feel, and if there is more of your work in these spaces where very traditional sculptures occupy otherwise. Thank you.
One of the first bronze I showed, which was the seated bronze with a silver patina, that was first installed in City Hall Park in Lower Manhattan. So that was kind of interesting because, it's sort of like basically in that area, whenever you see sculptures, they're of like dignitaries or so-called dignitaries. And so that was kind of interesting to have like this kind of monstrous seated figure there as another dignitary. And the Hirshhorn, where we come in pieces, that was not my idea. I mean, fortunately, they decided to install it there because it's in a very visible point. You can be walking down, or you could be in the sculpture garden, but you have to experience it. The only time when I actually had control over that was when I did the rooftop commission at the Met and decided to do these two sculptures on a monumental scale. And I realized that when I walked up and I saw the rooftop, and I realized it's not actually as big as I thought it was. So two would be enough, to sort of, I mean, that much I've sort of learned is that, how my work looks best and how it should be installed and how much of it there should be. So these are all considerations that I think are important, because that is how, I present the work, and then that is also a way of like how people will respond. I mean, you need a lot of space, and they usually tend to grow a lot the more space there is around them. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hello, and actually, I remember that for your older and larger projects, you mentioned that you love to use scale changes to indicate time changes to show the shifting ideas of time. So I'm wondering if if you could like expand a bit about it, like how you're going on with this idea after you scale down your projects like since 2021.
No, it's more like within works that, I like to introduce changes. Like when I showed you the one sculpture from the front, and then inside the head of it is like a tiny piece. So within so how do you think? Because except for We Come in Peace and some of the uh, totemic bronze pieces, the works are not that large. I've never had, I mean, when I first started working, obviously I had issues of space, uh, as most people do. So the idea was more to make, work that confronts you on a level where uh, where it has an effect of being a much larger work. So that was more what I felt I could do, because I wasn't able to make larger work. And even now, I think, the strength of a work doesn't necessarily lie in the scale. But within the works, like the sculpture that I showed from 2007, which is made up of many different parts. It functions as a landscape, and at the same time, there are larger monuments on it. So the idea of experiencing the scale within that, whether how big you are as opposed to the sculpture, are you within the landscape or are you not within it? I mean, it's very abstract. So that's how I approach it.
Hi. I was really interested in. It's obviously in your work, and you mentioned it numerous times, kind of in passing, or the 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 relationship between the ancient and your interest in science fiction, and the kind of often science fiction will, in imagining a future, it recalls the past or like references the past, and I'm just wondering if you can speak more on, I guess, that relationship between your interest in the ancient and science fiction or kind of the future.
I mean, I think one of the movies that sort of, was very influential to me was David Cronenberg's Scanners. And this was a long time ago, and it sort of changed my idea of how I wanted to make sculpture. And I wasn't thinking so consciously about, how to integrate my interest in looking at ancient sculpture, whether it be from, many ancient different cultures and sci-fi. I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but in the process of making and the materials that I was using and the kind of imagery that was coming out of that, I think it was a natural sort of progression. And yeah, because it wasn't a conceptual idea or anything. It was more like, I make something and then I see the result. Does it work or does it not work? Where do I go from there? And when I look at sculpture and the history of sculpture, ancient, contemporary, modern, it's more like what I'm getting from different places that I want to sort of, include in what I'm doing. And of course, I'm not completely redoing them because not possible for me to do that, but it is my version of it. But then the way I think it's in the making process where things transform. And when you can transform materials and then gradually you transform this way that it is perceived. I
think we have time for one more question.
There's somebody over there. Up there.
think my question is fairly quick. I noticed a change in the prominence of color and vibrant color, which to me, the connection that I made, at one point I studied archaeology, and a lot of the sculptures that you find that are ancient actually have lost their color. So I noticed that you referenced a lot of ancient sculpture that didn't have that color. I'm very curious what the experience has been for you, over from 2006 and 7 to now, and the emergence of color in the work that you're doing.
I've always, from high school, I really liked, Fauvism and Expressionism, and that's always full of color. And so it was something that I think I had a little bit of knowledge about, and then obviously through my art training, you learn more about it. Sometimes you put it aside for several years and then you come back to it. And I understand what you're saying about the sculptures that I refer to. They used to be polychromatic, but they're not anymore. But so I guess maybe it is sort of thinking about how mine would be. But I think the color that I'm using a lot in my sculptures is more like expressionistic mark making, and what materials and what colors actually will stick to those. The painted sculptures is also like an interest in seeing, if I am able to do that successfully. So, I just use color as I go, and I try to experiment as much as possible. But of course, again, it's like what works, what doesn't work. I have a very formal approach to my art making, so it's one thing next to the other, and how to make things work. Thank you.